Imagine if Netflix didn't just pivot to streaming back in, what, 2007,
Right.
but they actually kept a, like, fully funded, continuously updated ghost version of their original DVD by mail business, just running in a massive data simulation to this day.
Wow.
Yeah, picture this highly advanced digital model, right? Fed by real-time postal rates, modern supply chain data, current consumer demographics, and it's just evolving quietly on a server farm somewhere, completely parallel to the streaming empire we all know. I mean, it sounds like science fiction, or maybe just a colossal waste of server space.
It sounds deeply counterintuitive to how we are taught to run a business. I mean, we are trained to make a decision, allocate our resources to that decision, and just, burn the ships behind us.
Yeah.
So maintaining a fully operational simulation of the path you explicitly chose not to take, that violates almost every rule of traditional industrial era management.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is so provocative. We are digging into a new strategy paper titled Virtual Twins Organizations by Elena Kochanovskaya and Michel Zarka. And for you listening, whether you are, prepping for a board meeting or just trying to understand where organizational design is heading, you are essentially going to overhear the two of us try to figure out if the fundamental concept of choosing a strategic direction is, well, officially dead.
It's a big claim.
It is. The authors argue it needs to be replaced by what they call a quantum-like superposition of organizational possibilities.
That phrase alone, a quantum-like superposition, it really signals the ambition here.
Oh, totally.
The paper proposes that our entire legacy architecture for navigating complexity is just broken.
Yeah.
They aren't just suggesting a new type of corporate dashboard. They are outlining a completely new organism.
Right.
But we have to examine this critically,
Yeah.
We cannot just accept a theoretical framework because it uses fascinating terminology. We really need to dissect the mechanics.
And I am bringing my sharpest skepticism to the table today.
Good. We need that.
Because when I first read through their framework, my immediate reaction was to ask, is this genuinely a new paradigm? Or are we just looking at scenario planning and digital twins dressed up in a very expensive academic new suit?
Fair question.
So to figure that out, we have to evaluate their diagnosis of the modern business environment. They argue that organizations now operate in a Brownian world. Let's establish what they mean by that mechanism.
Right. So in physics, Brownian motion describes the random, multidirectional movement of particles colliding in a fluid.
Okay.
The authors use this to describe an environment where market signals don't just fluctuate. They actively collide and continuously alter each other's trajectories.
I see.
In a Brownian environment, a localized pattern might look meaningful for a moment, but it is instantly disrupted by distant, unseen forces.
So it's pure chaos.
Essentially, yes. The critical takeaway is that the future cannot be extrapolated from the past. The accumulation of constant micro-shifts produces total macro discontinuities.
But, I want to challenge the novelty of that diagnosis right out of the gate. Haven't we known for decades that the world is unpredictable?
Well,
If we look at Carl Weick's work on organizational sense-making from the 1990s, or Peter Senge's systems thinking, or even just the corporate buzzword of a VUCA environment, right?
Yeah.
Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Is labeling it a Brownian world actually telling us anything we don't already know?
the diagnosis of complexity itself is not the breakthrough here. You are completely justified in pointing out the lineage from Weick and Senge.
Okay, so where does it differ?
Where this paper deliberately departs from existing theory is in its critique of the reflexive response organizations have to that complexity.
What do you mean by reflexive response?
Well, when volatility rises in a traditional command and control hierarchy, the instinct is to tighten the grip. The organization increases measurement frequency, multiplies performance KPIs, and monitors activity at ever more granular levels.
Oh, yeah. The classic anxiety response. The market gets scary, so the executive team demands 50 more dashboards to create the illusion of control.
And the authors argue this is mathematically and operationally flawed because it collapses your optionality entirely too early. When you try to force a single linear strategic path in a Brownian world, you abandon alternative futures before you even know you might desperately need them.
Right, because things shift so fast.
The paradigm shift they are proposing is that strategy must stop trying to predict and execute one path. Instead, the organization must architect itself to maintain a field of plausible futures simultaneously.
Okay, if the old way of pick a path and execute is broken, we need a new engine entirely. But maintaining a field of futures sounds Conceptually beautiful, but operationally terrifying.
It is definitely a heavy lift.
The paper introduces the Virtual Twin Organization, or VTO, as the mechanism to do this, but they state that before you can even build a VTO, you need two raw materials. The first is organizational singularity.
Right. And singularity in this context doesn't mean artificial intelligence taking over.
Good to clarify.
It refers to the unique, irreplaceable essence of the company. It's the tacit knowledge trapped in the minds of your engineers, the unspoken cultural norms, the specific distributed expertise, and the historical way your people and technology interact.
Like the organization's DNA.
Exactly. DNA that cannot be easily copied by a competitor.
That anchors the company to its reality. But the paper argues singularity alone just traps you in the past. To move into this Brownian future, it has to be combined with the second raw material, which is structured imagination.
Right. And they define imagination not as, like, artistic creativity, but as a systemic, operational capability to construct desirable futures beyond what current data suggests is merely plausible.
And this is where my skepticism flares up again, quite intensely.
I can guess why.
How do you actually operationalize imagination? In corporate reality, imagination usually means locking the executive team in a hotel conference room with a whiteboard and some stale pastries.
Oh, absolutely.
Or recently, just asking a large language model to generate a 10-page memo on market trends. Neither of those creates operational breakthroughs. If this framework relies on humans just brainstorming better, it kind of falls apart.
The authors would likely agree with your cynicism about strategy offsites. That is why they introduced the mechanism of braided organizations.
Braided?
Yeah, they're not talking about humans sitting around a whiteboard. A braid is a dynamic, tightly interwoven configuration of human contributors and AI agents connected by massive real-time information flows.
We hear the term hybrid intelligence thrown around a lot, though. What is the actual mechanical difference between a worker just using an AI tool and a braid?
Connect this back to Herbert Simon's concept of bounded rationality.
Okay.
Simon pointed out that human decision-makers are fundamentally limited by the information they have access to and the cognitive capacity they possess to process it. We can only hold a few variables in our head at once.
Right, our brains have limits.
Braids are structurally designed to break those bounds. In a braided organization, AI agents aren't just answering prompts, they are continuously generating variations, testing assumptions, and simulating thousands of scenarios at a scale and speed impossible for biological brains.
Wow.
The human contributors in the braid provide the contextual judgment, the ethical boundaries, and the overarching strategic intent.
Let's ground this in a tangible thought experiment.
Sure.
Let's say you're the leadership team at a traditional, highly regulated bank, and you are trying to navigate the future of decentralized finance, or DeFi. In a legacy structure, a human analyst team spends 6 months researching, interviews a few experts, and writes a static PDF report.
Yep, a very familiar process.
So in a braided organization, how does this look different?
In the braided model, the AI agents are constantly scraping regulatory chatter from the SEC, analyzing liquidity flows in crypto pools, and running Monte Carlo simulations on how a new tokenomic model might impact the bank's traditional lending margins.
So it's happening continuously.
Real time. They are generating hundreds of specific data-backed futures. The human bankers aren't doing the math. They're evaluating the outputs. They were looking at, say, future number 412 and saying, well, the margin is great, but the reputational risk here violates our core singularity. Discard it. Focus the AI on iterating future number 205 instead.
It reminds me of how modern chess grandmasters play in those Centaur tournaments.
Yes.
You have a human paired with a chess engine. The computer computes 10,000 board permutations per second, recognizing tactical patterns instantly. But the human decides the psychological style of play. They steer the computer toward positions that will make the specific human opponent uncomfortable.
That is a perfect analogy. The organization transforms from a system that merely processes historical information into a generative engine that actively constructs futures.
But consider the implication of that generative engine. If my bank's AI braid is generating 500 plausible data-backed DeFi futures every single week, my executive team isn't empowered by that. They are paralyzed. I mean, the cognitive load of managing that much optionality is impossible for a human board. We would drown in our own possibilities.
That paralysis is the exact failure point of legacy structures trying to use modern AI.
Okay.
You cannot plug a generative engine into a linear management hierarchy. You need a completely new architecture to house those futures without drowning in them. And to solve this, The authors introduce a formal equation for the virtual twin organization. It's R plus V omega.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that equation.
Sure.
R stands for reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
The organization's currently in active state. And V omega represents the structured space of virtual futures, meaning at any given moment, the company physically exists as its current operations, but structurally includes a portfolio of simulated futures.
Exactly. We can categorize these into two distinct types of twins. First is the active twin, that is the R.
The reality.
Yes, it is the specific strategy the organization actually selected and is currently executing in the physical world.
Yeah.
You sign the leases, you hire the developers, you launch the marketing campaign.
The path we chose. But here's the critical departure. In a traditional company, once you pick the active twin, you throw the other slide decks in the trash.
Right.
In the VTO framework, those unchosen futures become ghost twins, and they are not discarded.
No, they are maintained.
Wait, ghost twins are fascinating. Are you saying organizations should continue investing computational resources into futures they deliberately rejected?
I'm glad you stopped us there because I had the exact same reaction.
Why on earth would a CFO approve funding to continuously simulate a strategy the executive team already decided not to pursue? It sounds like paying rent on an apartment you already moved out of.
It is arguably the most radical, counterintuitive proposition in the entire paper. They call this concept persistent strategic optionality.
Persistent strategic optionality, okay.
To understand why a CFO would fund it, we have to look at the mechanics of how a strategy dies in the real world. Let's look at Airbus as an example.
Okay, Airbus.
Imagine Airbus chooses a specific active twin strategy focused entirely on building a hydrogen propulsion supply chain. They commit billions to it. But during the strategy phase, they had another highly developed option, a ghost twin focused on radically upgrading sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF.
Right, that's
The paper argues you don't archive the SAF plan. You keep it alive in the simulation.
But how? I mean, it's not just a saved Excel file sitting on a hard drive somewhere. What does keeping it alive actually mean operationally?
It means the ghost twin is continuously fed real-time, real-world data through API integrations and market feeds.
Wow, really?
Yeah. As global titanium prices fluctuate, as new environmental regulations are passed in the EU, as supply chain disruptions hit specific ports, all of that raw data is fed into both the physical operations of the active twin and the simulation of the ghost twin.
So it's learning alongside reality.
The AI braid continuously adjusts the financial projections, the required hiring timelines, and the operational bottlenecks of the SAF strategy, as if you were actually building it. It evolves in parallel to reality.
So 2 years later, if your physical hydrogen supply chain suddenly hits an insurmountable geopolitical roadblock, you don't have to call an emergency offsite and start from scratch.
Exactly.
You already have a fully matured, data-fed alternative running in the background.
You just activate the ghost twin. It is warm. It is adapted to the current market conditions of today, not the market conditions of 2 years ago when you originally came up with the idea.
That's incredible.
Rita McGrath's research on transient competitive advantage tells us that strategies have increasingly shorter lifespans. The ghost twin architecture operationally solves for that. It forces the organization to acknowledge that its active strategy will likely become obsolete much faster than comfortable, making the cost of cloud compute for a ghost twin incredibly cheap insurance.
Okay, but if these ghost twins are running continuously in the background, absorbing the constraints of the real world, how do they actually interact with the human executives running the physical company?
Through a mechanism the authors call dynamic temporal symbiosis.
Dynamic temporal symbiosis.
Yeah, it is a bidirectional feedback loop. The present physical execution feeds data into the virtual futures, keeping them grounded in reality. But the virtual futures feed insights back to the present decision makers. The ghost twins can flag systemic risks, suggest alternative responses, and highlight unintended consequences before they ever happen in the physical world.
Let's put the listener in the room for a moment to test this theory.
Let's do it.
If you are listening to this on your way to work, imagine your next quarterly review meeting. Let's say you are the leadership team at Netflix again. What if that meeting began by reviewing 5 ghost twins instead of just doing an autopsy on past financial performance?
It fundamentally alters the cognitive flow of leadership. Instead of spending the meeting defending why last quarter's numbers missed the mark, the board is evaluating the future stability of the active twin against the evolved reality of the ghost twins.
So they're looking forward instead of backwards.
Exactly. They might look at, say, Ghost Twin B, which simulated an aggressive pivot into live sports broadcasting. The AI Braid reports that based on new advertising yields and competitor stumbles fed into the system this morning, Ghost Twin B is now projecting a 40% higher return on capital than your current physical strategy.
Which forces the hardest question. What happens when an abandoned future suddenly becomes measurably more valuable than the strategy currently being executed? Do you just flip a switch and swap the twins?
Well, the framework suggests the boundaries become highly fluid. It isn't a catastrophic pivot. It is a seamless transition to a path that has already been systemically stress-tested.
Okay, I see.
But this is exactly where we have to evaluate the severe limitations of this paper. For this to work, it requires a level of systemic simulation that borders on the impossible today.
Right, because you aren't just simulating a supply chain or a financial spreadsheet. To know if a ghost twin is actually viable, the VTO has to simulate human friction.
Yes.
It has to model human-AI interaction, office politics, cognitive biases, and collective intelligence.
And historical attempts at this have failed spectacularly. Think about Stafford Beer's project CyberSyn in Chile in the early 1970s.
Oh, right.
It was a visionary attempt to manage a national economy via a real-time network of telex machines and cybernetic modeling. But it struggled intensely because you cannot easily model the messy, irrational reality of human behavior into an equation.
I mean, if your simulation assumes that your engineering department and your marketing department will collaborate perfectly on this massive pivot to live sports, but in reality, the two VPs absolutely hate each other and hoard information, your ghost twin is feeding you garbage data. It
Exactly.
just becomes a sterile utopia.
And the authors openly acknowledge this vulnerability. They emphasize that the VTO must capture how intelligence forms, or fails to form, within specific configurations. It has to model the interdependencies and the friction, not just the isolated financial variables.
And it's as if it doesn't.
If the AI braids cannot accurately model the human resistance to change, the ghost twin is nothing more than an expensive video game.
So we are looking at this incredible, slightly daunting vision, an organization constantly generating alternative futures via hybrid AI braids, keeping the unchosen paths alive as fully funded ghost twins, and continuously orchestrating them as the Brownian environment shifts around them. Strategy is no longer about selection, it is about dynamic orchestration.
Beautifully put.
But practically speaking, what evidence would eventually be needed to prove this framework actually works in the real world?
We would need to observe a major global organization survive a catastrophic, entirely unpredicted industry shock, and not by scrambling and laying off a third of their workforce, but by seamlessly transitioning to a ghost twin that had been maturing in the background.
We'd need to see it in action.
Yes, we would need empirical proof that maintaining these virtual futures actually reduces the time and friction of a strategic pivot by an order of magnitude.
Which brings us back to our original mission today. Did we just read a genuinely new paradigm or just a clever rebranding of agile management and scenario planning?
It clearly inherits a tremendous amount from complexity theory. But the specific conceptual architecture, the non-eliminative logic of funding ghost twins and the systemic integration of human AI braids to generate those twins, it feels genuinely original.
It really does push the boundaries.
It aggressively challenges the bedrock assumption that making a strategic choice requires eliminating your alternatives.
Even if the computational reality of simulating human friction isn't fully mature yet, the mindset shift is undeniable.
Unquestionably.
Which leads me to one final speculative thought experiment for you to end this deep dive. Imagine it is the year 2036, 10 years from now. Looking back, which single idea from this paper ultimately changed management thinking the most, and why?
I believe it will be the death of the 5-year plan.
Really? The 5-year plan?
Yes. By 2036, the idea that a board of directors would lock an organization into a single, unalterable trajectory will seem as archaic and reckless as trying to navigate a global shipping route using a paper map and a compass while completely ignoring the weather radar. The realization that you can and must keep alternative futures alive and evolving alongside your physical reality, that will be the lasting legacy of the virtual twin organization.
A quantum-like superposition of organizational possibilities. It really does force you to look at your own daily operations differently. For you listening, think about your own team tomorrow morning. Are you blindly executing a single active twin? And more importantly, what ghost twins might you be ignoring?
It is the defining question every leader in a Brownian world is eventually going to have to answer.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the ghosts of your own strategic futures. Keep questioning the map, and we will see you on the next Deep Dive.